So now that Dad's ute is running, it's time to finish it off and get it ready for the dyno. So here we are, after 20 episodes. I mean, it was supposed to be just a little 5-episode build, but after 20 episodes, yes, Dad's ute finally runs. And runs pretty good, but it doesn't drive. The tailshaft isn't hooked up. The throttle isn't hooked up. The kickdown isn't hooked up. It needs a seat in it, needs all the guards bolted on properly, the front, the grill, all that. It needs the brakes bled. There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to happen before we can take this ute anywhere, and definitely needs to happen before we can put it on the dyno. So that's what this episode's all going to be about, getting this thing ready so we can take it down to max performance, put it on the dyno, tune it up, and see what sort of power this thing makes. Pretty interested to see what this little 318 will do, but it sounds pretty impressive so far. Anyway, time for it to go up on the hoist once again so we can bolt in that tail shaft. Because I've misplaced my straps, I have no idea where they've gone. Had to go down to Valiant Spares guys and get some new bolts and straps. So we'll get this tail shaft bolted up. Hopefully this is the last time we have to touch this. There's that one. Okay. Tail shaft done. Down, down, down we go. So now we've got to fit our throttle cable bracket, which requires removing the 2 bolts at the back of the manifold. Of course, though, one of the bolts can't come out without removing the distributor. Yes, that's going to suck because I've already got the timing set. That means it's going to put it all out of whack again. But anyway, I've turned the engine over to top dead center. Now I need to find out if it's the compression stroke or the exhaust stroke. But anyway, let's pop the cap off. Let's pop a cap in it. And if we're really lucky, it's pointing at number 1. It's 180 degrees out. Well, at least we know. At least we know. Okay, well, I'll lift it up again, rotate it around 360 degrees, which will line the dizzy up, so that way it'll make it very easy to fire up when we get back to that. Okay, so I'm going to rotate the engine around 360 degrees, which will bring the dizzy around 180 degrees because the dizzy spins at half the speed of the engine. But Matt just asked me a very reasonable question, and that is, why not just pop the dizzy out where it is and just remember to put it back in 180 degrees out? Sure, you can do that. However, just to save yourself any trouble down the track, it is always better to pull it out at top dead center on the compression stroke, and that way you know exactly where you're putting it back in, because we may pull the dizzy out and then get sidetracked onto something else, and the dizzy may go back in a week later, and if we forget how it went in, we're in all sorts of trouble, because nothing worse than chasing a dizzy that is way out of sync. So we'll rotate this around. You can really feel that 10.5 to 1 compression, which is good. It's going to give us all the horses. Yeah, feel the burn. Yep, that looks about right. Here we go. And down we go. Okay, so our rotor button is facing pretty much where it needs to be. We can pop off all these leads. Pop, 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 pop. So you can see here, we've got the rotor button lined up with this mark on the distributor I've left. So that is number 1. And that lines up with a corresponding mark on the cap of the number 1 cylinder. So we can unplug the distributor. Thankfully it has a quick disconnect harness. Now I just need to get my socket in there and do the bolt, pop her out. Then we can do these manifold bolts. Urgh, it's so annoying. Okay, so we've marked where the vacuum canister is pointing because that's fixed to the housing, so we know roughly where the dizzy should be sitting when we put it back into the car. We've had a slight oil leak down the back there. The oil line for our gauge has leaked here at the top of the block. I think it's because the gauge line, well, the line that I've used is not actually autometer gauge line, so it might not be the right size. Might have to go get some autometer stuff to make it work properly. But anyway, let's pop the dizzy out. Get our bracket on here. Some might say, why didn't you do that before, Scott? That's because I didn't have the bracket before. It's only come into my possession the last couple of days. Right. And so I'm back. Had to divert for a little bit to fix the Lexan. It kind of broke down on Telf, but anyway, we'll deal with that issue later. In the meantime though, I've got the dizzy out. I've got an oil leak at the back of the block. It's where the oil line feeds the gauge. And I suspect it's because the line I've used is for a different brand of gauge, and I don't think the olive is seated correctly. So what I've done is I found the block at home that has the right fitting for that line. Hopefully it will solve our problem. So what I'm going to have to do is crack off the old fitting. So there's the fitting I just pulled out of the 318, and there's the fitting that came with that gauge originally, and I am correct, the angles on the fittings are different. So I reckon that is why it has leaked, and leaked quite badly, really annoyingly. I was almost going to revert to swapping all the hardware over to this plastic line kit, which I swore I wasn't going to do. I actually thought I threw that in the bin, but maybe I recovered it, I don't know. However, we'll put this one in, seal her up, and hopefully that doesn't leak. I'm doing all this now before I drop the dizzy back in, because once the dizzy's in, that area becomes very busy. So let's do this and get the dizzy in. Hopefully we can fire it up with no leaks. So it's nice and tight. There's another thing I can feed up in there. So I figure most of you by now have watched the video where we start up the engine for the first time. And as you saw, it did fire it up first time. We had the idle turned a little bit low, so it stumbled and coughed a little bit, but we got it there. So the best way to fire up an engine for the first time, or even just insert a dizzy and make sure your engine fires up the first time with the dizzy reinstalled, is wind it to top dead center on the compression stroke, all right? So the compression stroke is the firing stroke. So you get it to top dead center. Remember, there's two top dead centers. There's the top dead center of the exhaust stroke and the compression stroke. So engine fires once every 720 degrees. So you want it on the top dead center of the compression stroke. And to find that, what you do is you pull your number one spark plug, put your thumb over the hole, wind the engine over by hand until you start to feel pressure increase against your thumb. And when you know that's happening, that's the compression stroke. So you wind it to top dead center on that stroke, all right, and then you install your dizzy. So to install the dizzy in this, because it's either right or 180 degrees out, because the way the Mopar small block uses this little spade bit, I just lined up the oil pump drive with it roughly lined up that it would put our rotor button near where number one was going to be on the dizzy cap. So we made sure we notated, we put a mark there on the body of the dizzy, put a mark on the dizzy cap where number one was going to be, and that made life a lot easier. So if you follow those kind of instructions, those simple instructions, it should make your life easier too. So anyway, let's insert this. Now we marked where the body was pointing to, the body of the dizzy was pointing to on the body of the car or the body of the engine. And that helps us reinstall the dizzy again in the same spot as we took it out. So this thing should fire up nicely first time. So we've got tape here on the engine. That's where our vacuum canister is pointing. We've got number one pointing at number one on the body of the dizzy. So we can lock the dizzy down basically there, put the cap on, put the plugs in, and it should fire straight up. Dizzy cap back on. Dizzy is back in. Right, now we can do accelerator cable. Moving on. So to hook up our accelerator cable to our Edelbrock carby, they make a linkage that's specific to Chryslers. And it just happened I had the little linkage sitting on an old 2-barrel carby over there in the parts pile. So bolt the linkage onto the side of the carby, or onto the original linkage of the carby. Then we can hook up our Chrysler throttle cable. Easy peasy. It's so cute. So just going to put a little bracket here with a throttle return spring on it. We might come up with a better solution later, but for the moment, this will work. Lock that down. Cool. Now, for our kickdown, what do we got here? Low-car kickdown cable. So we've talked about kickdown cables a bit in the past. It's kind of an old school term. I'm old school, so that's what I call them. They're actually they're equivalent to, say, the throttle valve cable on a Turbo 700, you know, TB cable, which is basically a line pressure cable. So if you run without it, you'll kill your transmission, all right? Simple as that. So unless it's set up for full manual and it's got a specific valve body in it. So basically it decides what the line pressure is in your transmission, and it bases that off throttle position. So you hook up properly, set it up, and you won't have any problems. Don't run it and you'll kill your transmission within about 30 minutes. Yep. Oh yeah, yay. Instructions. Gotta love them. All right, got some reading to do there. It's been a while since I've fitted one of these. So we're going to mount our kickdown cable on the transmission, bolts to one of these bolts on the tailshaft housing here, and then that attaches to the kickdown lever, which we've mounted up there. Yeah, so basically this end hooks down here, sort of loops around and comes in from the back, so it pulls that direction, and then we're going to hook it to the carby at the other end. But once it's all hooked up, she should be happy days. So you know how you have good days and bad days? Well, this is not a good day. So I've sorted out, I've got the kickdown cable kind of where it needs to be and sort of sorted, and I hooked up the shifter cable. I thought, should be able to fire this up and back it out this afternoon, but no. As soon as I hooked up the shifter cable, shifter was really tight, like barely get it to change gears. So done all sorts of repositioning of the cable, no difference. Now I've unhooked it completely and running it free, and it's still mega tight, which means there's a good chance we've crushed the shifter cable at some point during the installation, and it means I need to get a new shifter cable because it's unusable right now, which sucks because I've spent most of the day on this already. So we lost the day and we've got to spend more money. Bugger. And also, not happy with the way the throttle cable sits. Like, it'll work, but it's not. We need to kind of modify the bracket, sort of cut it, lift it, move it forward, which means pulling the dizzy again. Modifying stuff. Fun. That's what they say. Cars are fun. Not today, they aren't. I just realised when we dropped our transmission before, I forgot to check the dizzy on that. It doesn't look like it's hit the firewall, but yeah, that's a thing. Yeah, that is definitely a thing. If you drop the engine back too far with these, the dizzy hits the firewall and actually bends the dizzy in the shaft. Pretty sure we didn't do that because the pipes and everything stopped the box from dropping too far. It only dropped that much. Yeah, I think we're safe. I'll just pretend we're safe. Okay, so that's got to go up here. So before I move on to modifying that throttle cable, I just want to see where this shifter cable is crushed. I have double checked, I disconnected it off the shifter end and the shifter moves freely. So it's definitely the cable is rooted or something's wrong with it. So I've already loosened that off, haven't I? There we go. So I've got to remove all this hardware off this end. It's got to get pulled up through the cabin floor because there's a tab on the other end that prevents it from being run down. You can't pull it down, it has to go up. And that means all this hardware has to come off this end, which means all the adjustment is now totally out of whack. Okay, so it looks fine there. seems okay down here. All right, I'll lower it down and we'll pull that up through the cab. Oh yeah, I think it's there. Yeah, that's the way it's supposed to move. Certainly wasn't doing that. Yeah, it looks like it's kind of kinked it there, I think, where it comes through the floor. You just can't even move it by hand, which sucks. So it looks like we're up for a new cable. The new cable is, well, $150 to $200. Bucka. So we'll go get a shifter cable shortly, but in the meantime, I'm going to modify our throttle cable bracket. So that portion there needs to be kind of there and there. So we'll cut that off and we'll add some stuff in there to move it. Time for some cutting and some welding. I haven't used this bad boy in a while. Let's give it a try. The blade's not the best. The blade's not the best, but still hacked through it nicely. More just up and forward. So I've just tacked it into place to start off with. I'll go have a look on the car, and if I'm happy with that, I'm going to burn that in and we'll move on. That's got to be same angle as that. That there. Well, that is a fine piece of butchery. We'll make it work. Now that's art. These go straight to the pool room, but nope, straight to the Valiant. So we've got our throttle linkage all set up. Pretty happy with how it's all positioned and how it pulls and throws and all that sort of stuff. We'll paint that bracket a bit later and make it all nice and pretty. But the kickdown linkage is proving to be more difficult. When the throttle pulls back, it binds up on the kickdown linkage, and there is no way to avoid it. I've tried running it either way, either direction, and either direction it catches on something. And it's a real problem in that you pay good money for these parts. Like that kickdown cable was 250 bucks, and you think you buy it for this setup, it should just work. No, they want you to use their throttle cable as well, which is like an extra $200. I don't know if I want to throw another $200 at a throttle cable just so I can use their kickdown cable, you know, like, feels like extortion. That's what it feels like. But I don't know, I really don't know how this is all going to work together, because at the moment it is not. It's doing my head in. And then I've still got to go buy a shifter cable, which, yeah, another 150, 200 bucks. So it's all adding up, and it's all causing me some frustration, and it's all stuff that is not going to get solved today. And of course you guys want a video tomorrow. So we're going to cut it off there. I hate leaving these problems unsolved. I hate having to come back to them another day, but it's just the reality of video editing and YouTube and all that stuff. So it is what it is. Anyway, we'll have to solve this another day, and you guys will see it all on a future episode of Carnage.